Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. As you'll notice, you have joined the call camera and microphone off, and we'll just ask that you stay that way for now. My name is James Zabrowski. I serve as the Executive Director for Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization. We support entrepreneurship clubs at university and college campuses. And we are joined today with the Slyngshot crew from the Singleton Foundation for Financial Literacy and Entrepreneurship. And of course, Will Cady here with Reddit. We're super excited to have you all joining us today. And I would really like to dive right into our program, as I know that time is the most valuable treasure. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ryan Groves. Ryan is the head of entrepreneurship at the Singleton Foundation and co-founder of Slyngshot. Ryan is going to go ahead and introduce our speaker this evening and get things rolling. One housekeeping item, as a quick reminder, I do ask that you keep your camera and microphone off. I'm going to make sure that I keep Ryan and Will center of attention here. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask for Ryan or Will, please direct message those questions to me or place them in the chat. Ryan.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, everyone. Really excited about it. Oh, my wife and kids just got back with the dogs. That's really extra exciting. More guests. Super glad to meet you. As James said, so I'm head of entrepreneurship for the Singleton Foundation. We are trying to create a world where anyone, regardless of their background or education, would be able to play the game, would be able to participate, take ownership of their time, their life, their money, their ideas. So as such, we get to meet a lot of really cool people who do that in phenomenal ways. I met Will. Gosh, Will, when was it? Like year, 2 years ago now?
I think so. Maybe even 3.
Yeah. And we're in San Francisco. It was a while back, but it was at a roundtable discussion on like, what is the future of capitalism? And we're at a table, like that conversation in an academic setting is one thing, but we were at a table with, C-suite from a, Goldman Sachs, rappers, artists, an incredible hodgepodge of wonderful people all coming together from different backgrounds saying, how do we shape and create a world together? And so that is where I first got to hear Will and his phenomenal ability to not just synthesize what is, but to help dream up what could be and to bring other people along with that. And that's something that, like, for all of you, as we're sharing this conversation with Will, what I've loved is like, man, to have a heart to, even in his work with Reddit, to create conversation, to create the place where the conversation happens and where a conversation is taking place that gives people permission to participate and to create and to do that next thing in their own life and to bring that to the world. That's really remarkable. So Will, and like the quick intro, and I'm not going to say much, Will, I'll let you sell yourself. But Will's a wonderful guy. He's here in LA. He's has a wife, Rachel, right? Better not mess this up. Rochelle, pardon me, who's also really lovely. They're here in LA. They're great people. Will is a futurist, a technologist, a human, a philanthropist in the truest sense of ideas. And he is also a bass player, as you can tell from behind him, something that we share and I deeply respect him for. And very topically, Will is now the author of Which Way is North, a book that he has coming out in, gosh, I ordered it and I don't know when it's coming, Will.
It'll be,
but he's the author of a new book.
October 10th, it'll be out. It's on pre-sale now, though.
On pre-sale now. And so we'll drop that in the chat. But anyways, I'd love to introduce Will Cady to you guys. He has a wonderful mind for what is and what could be and how we all participate in that. So, all of us digital claps. Will, take it away.
That's an incredible introduction. I can't take credit for what Reddit is. It's simply something that I think it might be the second greatest choice that I've made in my life, other than the more important one, which was to get on my knee and ask Rochelle to marry me. Reddit was it's like a Craigslist. It was like a Wikipedia. It was a fundamentally important part of the internet that wasn't really operating as a business. And when the opportunity came to join in a role to build out their brand strategy, which became their creative strategy function, I mean, it was an easy yes for me. You know, it's because I had used it for such a long time as a musician. So that's really the broad strokes of my story. Is 15 years professional musician, went to Berklee College of Music, played in a rock band in New England for about 10 years, and didn't know what to do with it. You know, music industry is like a leading indicator of a lot of change in the world. And at about the time, like 2009, when I sort of stepped into my career, the music industry was just rubble and fire. It was just completely dismantled. And that was the circumstance that led to me looking for other answers, led me to Los Angeles, led me to digital media, led me to realize that being a bass player was one thing, but being a creative was another. And I found all these different applications for it. And so started working at some music magazines that were going online and figured out what digital media is and found my way into entrepreneurship and realized that like what kind of drives me is what moves people, you know, literally with music, but also in culture. And these patterns are the same. So that's really, you know, one kind of thread that is foundational to what the book, Which Way is North, is about. But I'm part of a cohort of a lot of people that have been riding on a similar wave of realizing the role that creativity has in the question of being human in the modern world. So there's a lot of rabbit holes I can go down. Ryan, I'll let you point me in different directions, but music, culture, Reddit, it's all about diving into the rabbit holes and gaining a little bit of understanding on the other side.
Great. So if it's okay, if I chase the rabbit holes, I would love to dive into more of the overlap. You were an artist who became an entrepreneur. You obviously can see how the two things coincide, but you and I, when we talked a lot about the confluence between someone who makes art or music versus someone who would shape a company. What can entrepreneurs learn from musicians?
Well, in a very technical and literal sense, the creative discipline of music is extraordinarily relevant to business. There's a lot of math in it. There's a lot of geometry in it. It's about harmony and it's about dissonance. And so when I first kind of identified that my music education gave me something to work with in the world of business, it was when I was in my first brainstorm meeting. I didn't even know the brainstorms existed, but I was walking by a hallway and just was kind of invited, tapped on the shoulder to jump into a room. And the way that the ideas were coming out at the table, I was like, oh, this is a jam session. This is just like, you know, sitting here with my bass in my hands and just having a couple riffs in the back pocket and knowing how to play them. But then as we got a little bit more involved and I started to do that more and more, I realized that there were some real actual elements of practice and music theory that really applied. So, you know, this is something that I write about a bit, but for example, my guitar teacher had me do this drill where I had to really just like recalibrate my mind and my muscle memory into being able to reorder things very rapidly. So you'd be just like, when you're watching TV or just hanging out, just do this up and down the fretboard. And it's just basically every possible combination of numbers 1 through 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 3, 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4, 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that built this muscle that enabled me to receive an idea and then just spin it around really quickly like a Rubik's Cube and put it backwards, put it upside down. And so there's that times a dozen different things that they teach you in music that are directly applicable to the technical skills that you need to be a creative leader in the world of business. Now you're on mute. Still muted there. Now, so a couple of other things that I can,
Now I can unmute. Sorry about that. Go ahead. Yeah. Keep going. James had me on mute, everybody. That's on him. So
yeah, the master.
That's my bad. So sorry about that, Ryan.
It's okay. I just want you all to know I know how to use Zoom. I've learned. Okay. Excellent. Go ahead, Will. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, of course. So that's on the technical side. And then there's a bit of a change that I needed to go through in terms of, with my arts education, I was really motivated by like avant-garde sort of stuff. like really just like indulgent expression, which has its place for sure. I still have my place for indulgent expression. It's like, it's cathartic, it's therapeutic and all that. And my sense, my compass of what good is was really oriented around that. But when I stepped into the world of like music magazines and digital media and business and culture, I found a new compass, which is about cultural resonance, the things that people actually want to hear, because there's what you want to say, and then there's what other people want to hear. And that intersection, that in between of that Venn diagram, that's where all of the good stuff is. That's where opportunity is. If you're an entrepreneur and you're building a business and you're looking for product market fit, it's the unseen, the thing that isn't there yet but wants to be. That's where you can put your time and your creative energy to contribute something that can be really, really meaningful. And the time that I spent going so far on one side in terms of figuring out how to say what I want to say, and then the time that I spent having to be like jerked back to the other side in terms of like, no, like who's actually going to pay for what you're saying, as like a media salesperson, helped me to kind of tune that a little bit. And it's become a little bit of like an ongoing obsession, just like, where's the needle pointing? Like, where is culture going? It's all creative.
Yeah. And it's creative and it's collaborative. So it's that
Right.
interesting magic of like, Andy Crouch is somebody who we talked about, where he's another theorist on creativity and culture. And he says an idea isn't real till it's shared. It's like, you really haven't created something until you've shared it with someone else. Until then, it's an idea. It might even be a good idea, a great one, but you haven't created it until like you've put it somewhere where you can share it with another person. So coming from music and like understanding like, all right, I am making notes, I am making sound, but it becomes something when I do that with a listener and with other people in the band and riffing, and then going to Reddit, which is the ultimate jam session of everyone playing in this wild conversation. And that's fantastic. So like I know that your book explores this some. So if you could walk us through, you are holding all this weight in your mind of understanding, here's your inspiration, here's your audience, here's the tension of like, this also needs to make money. So as you're holding all these huge 30,000 foot considerations, where do you then dial it back down? How do you come up with the idea? Where do you start when you formulate a new thought or an idea that you're going to bring to the world? How do you do that?
Well, that was another stage of humbling, especially like coming from an arts background and being that kind of creative. It was all about my ideas. And I was like, I'm going to come up with the best things. People are going to be so impressed by my ideas. I can't wait. And then, you come crashing into a place like Reddit, and it is just so completely not about you. And that was, there was like a little bit of a fight there before I gave up the ghost. And a lot of people that enter Reddit in the field of creativity as part of our business, we all go through the same cycle where you're just like, eventually you just get to this point where you're just like, there is no way I could ever be as creative as the Reddit community is. That hive mind of hundreds of millions of people working together will always come up with something that you didn't expect, that is either way funnier or way cleverer or both than anything that any individual could come up with. And so that is like a framework on the internet, because these communities exist in that way, that's reliable. It's like a fountainhead of that kind of creativity. And that's the first thing that I realized. There's something incredibly special here. This is like a symphony orchestra that can play anything. And the job ended up being about enablement. It was like, okay, how can we put things in front of this incredible creative machine to make something happen? And it's a total retuning, right? It's just sort of, you're not making the music, you're not even conducting it, you're just putting as much sheet music and people in front of this incredible, orchestra as you can. And that's the job.
And that you, by the way, you're doing a killer job of that. Thank you. And love it. So like you've been at Reddit and you've seen so many different iterations of of people coming and going and sharing and creating, and how the company has changed and how the market's changed, and even the way we all discuss and talk to each other has changed. But if I could like point back to the book you just made and why you made it. So it's, if I may, and I'm going to read this so I don't get it wrong. So it's Which Way is North, a creative compass for makers, marketers, and mystics.
Mhm.
Why those three things? Why makers, marketers, mystics? Like, so from your experience, you're talking to these people, how does that fit into your worldview and how we all participate in that?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I started writing the book 3 years ago, and at the time that I began writing the book, those three identities, in particular the marketer and the mystic, were embarrassments to each other. Like, how could somebody that identifies as a mystic engage with money? How could somebody that engages with data be so naive as to engage with spirit, right? So those two things were so at odds with each other. And they've really integrated together in this moment in a couple of just funny and beautiful ways. When we last saw each other at CES, I showed you the deck of tarot cards that I designed for Reddit's activation in our Future Tellers Lounge. So mysticism is kind of having its moment. That's cute and all, but there's something much deeper and much more important that's been happening underneath that fad, that cultural trend. And the Reddit of it is what brought me there in the first place, is that there's this core value that the company has really used as its compass on a lot of different decisions and moments of growth and just its whole trajectory, which is remember the human. When you walk into headquarters, there's like huge glowing letters on the wall that say, remember the human. And at the time that I started at Reddit in 2016, that was a really interesting provocation in the face of big data that was kind of happening. Now it's an amazing provocation in the face of AI. And the questions that we're asking in terms of like, well, what is the human part of this whole thing? I mean, those are, you look to creative systems, you look to mystical systems to really understand the psyche in terms of our as individuals and as a culture. And all of those blueprints have so much value. And if there's anything that has propelled my story inside of Reddit over the last years that I carry on the inside, it's just having a high regard for the systems that I learned in music and the systems that I've learned in mysticism, and bringing those to bear and translating them to the world of marketing, because it's all about what makes us human. And so this book is really a bringing together of those three things off of the platform that playing with it at Reddit has given me.
Phenomenal, by the way, and thank you. So even somewhere as large as Reddit, like ultimately the core is human. I think we all are super quick to forget, like, hey, business is a game that we're playing for people, not people for business. So that's really, it's not just the nice thing to do. It's ultimately, it's the best thing to do. And with that, everybody here on this call, whether we acknowledge it or not, we are all kind of curators of our own ecosystem and cultivators of people and connection. And even when we come up with these ideas, they're not meant to be abusive or exploitative, but they're meant to be like, no, hey, we're doing this in kind. So on that, like, so how would you recommend that people on this call take to that curation of creativity, that realization that it's not just about you, your ideas, and apply it, and apply it to individual applications of like the other people. So like, how can we learn from your experience and apply it to the next generation of ideas? How do we keep this human in this brave new world, so to speak?
Well, first off, to never discount humans. I mean, it seems to be the missing part of so many different cultural conversations. Like, you look at every different paradigm shift, and we have like, we being like the LinkedIn feeds, the Twitter feeds, the Substack newsletters, like the kind of like industry level conversation is so focused on the tech. But the interesting thing is what humans are going to do with it, that adaptation ability that we have, and our ability to surmount obstacles, including the ones that are within us. So, like, principle in creativity and a principle in music is some of the best things that I've ever created, and that a lot of people ever create are created because of your limitations. when I was writing songs, cranking those out, all my best songs were me just failing at trying to learn somebody else's song because I couldn't do it. I couldn't actually play it. And then I end up somewhere else. Anytime a new technology comes to bear, we tend to measure power in its capacity for destruction. And so we look at what new technology is going to take away. But if you look at things from their capacity for creation, you're looking at the human signal. How are humans going to adapt to this? And there's a feeling of hope, optimism, like kind of, they're like dirty words, dirty ideas. But like, that's where vision comes from. Like if you see something that excites you as a response to the doom and gloom of what is so present in a lot of these conversations, build against that. Like, because it doesn't happen unless somebody builds it, and it's an adaptation. It's a response to a challenge. It's a response to a limitation. It's a response to an obstacle. And it's that thing that humans see that's not there. That is the one thing we can do that is really special. We see what's not there.
And so how do you know when you have an idea worth growing, when you found it?
That's a legitimately tough question. Well, I want to answer that the way that it deserves. Because there's one version of an answer that is, like a feeling, you just kind of know when you've got something good on your hands. But the other one is how people respond to it. So, for example, in terms of figuring out how to talk about my book, this is really just of the moment. There are so many different things that I want to say that it is, but in having a lot of conversations with people all throughout the process of writing it and now going into promoting it, you try like different sort of like pitches or whatnot, and you just sort of throw a couple like little fishing lures out there. And there were some conversations where I would say like, yeah, this book is about where creativity comes from, and people would like watch their body language, and then they just sort of like it does something to them. So noticing that, and then saying like, yeah, like I have this idea that anxiety is creativity ready to be transmuted. And then that they would I got a lot of responses from that. People were like, oh, that's really interesting. Now that was in it, but it was like that feeling that I was talking about at first, like you kind of know, like it's too nebulous. You can't actually build with it. But that response to where creativity comes from is like, okay, there's a connection there. But then when it's anxiety is creativity ready to be transmuted, that gets a little bit more technical. And it's like, okay, I can actually long form that. I can build off of that. So when I started to get those responses from people just in casual conversations, I knew where the resonance was. I knew what people wanted to hear of what I wanted to say. And I just kept sort of having that kind of dialogue, even like moments like this, like I'll be paying attention to, what kind of has that sort of excitement. And then I'll go back and I'll find a way to build against it in some way. Call and response.
That's great. It's the jam band all over again.
Yeah.
And so I think it's Miles Davis. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they would say like you couldn't play a wrong note with Miles Davis. If you played a note, he would make it right. And that's what made him so amazing, is he had jammed so many nights with so many people that, yes, he had the technical acumen to play and to improvise for sure, but it was the human experience of being able to get feedback and be like, oh, hey, you did that. Well, I'm going to do this. That will allow you to do X, Y, Z. And that constant interaction that, we all are attracted to in art and music. Yeah. If music was on its own, nobody would care, but it's that it's shared. So as you're making ideas, you are constantly in this cycle of sharing and, in listening and responding to that. So if I may take a page from Hot Ones, if it's all right, and share an Instagram picture you posted and have you unpack it.
Okay.
I can't. Oh, James, would you mind unlocking the screen share? If you can't, it's okay.
Good. That gives me a little time.
Ryan, give me 1 second. I'm working on it.
Okay. We're gonna play some hold music. It's gonna be great. Thank you, James. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, I'll expand on that last thought while that's happening.
Yeah, sure.
And I'll, I'll keep anchoring it back in my music education, but that same guitar teacher who had me do this finger thing to train my mind taught me about how to hold a groove as a bass player, which is really important. And he was like, you have to take it everywhere. So when you're walking around, like make a little beat with your feet as they kind of scrape on the dirt, like just kind of tap your hands everywhere. And that was what helped me become a better bass player, being able to hold a groove better. Mm-hmm. What I just talked about in terms of finding these little pockets of resonance and excitement in terms of like what to build against, take it everywhere. You know, it's on my mind all the time. This might not be good advice because sometimes my wife is like, come on, come back to earth. So it has that, but I'm always like thinking about what I'm grooving on. I'm always paying attention to it. And so I'm not like inserting it in every conversation, but like there's something in every conversation that informs what I'm thinking about.
And for our audience, for everyone that's called today, I think this is really key for all of us as we're launching companies and bringing ideas to the world, but then also supporting others. Will, if I may, I love that. I think that you being a bass player is precisely why you are so good at listening and asking the question, what's the groove? Mm-hmm. It's not what's the solo, when is my next big like drum break? It's okay, where's the pocket? How is everyone participating? How do I add to that? How do I enrich that? As a fellow bass player, everyone, please indulge me. Where like, you know, typically we think entrepreneur and we think, somebody's going to throw out Steve Jobs. And just like you would throw out, like, if you think music, well, yeah, what about Eddie Van Halen or Jimi Hendrix? And you don't as much like, you know, talk about these other people who helped make the music happen. I think your role in Reddit is like really like proof that, gosh, maybe the most powerful like place of influence is can we create a place to foster not just one idea, but millions, like thousands of voices. Like, how are we paying attention to the groove, bringing everyone into it and letting them come there? So here I've got screen share now. So I'm going to bring this up. All right. So you shared this on Instagram with your book coming out. We've been talking about how do we foster ideas, foster creativity, both within ourselves and in our community, and bring those ideas to bear. Okay, would you mind unpacking this? What does this mean?
Yeah, I'm so glad I cleared out my Instagram so that the only thing that's in there is book promo now and no longer photos of my puppy. I had to do that sort of ego transformation.
That's next. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay.
We got those too. Got the Wayback Machine. Okay.
So this is something I just put out a little article today kind of explaining what these are and where they came from. So in the book itself, there's two different ordering systems that help make sense of a very, very abstract concept, which is creativity. And it's about how creativity, where it comes from, how it unfolds. There's an inner game and an outer game. There's how you experience creativity and how you express it. So what I'm in the process of doing right now, like I said, I cleared out my social to begin a new conversation. I'm bringing people into the space that this book represents by starting with how the outer game looks. And that is what these symbols represent, how creativity unfolds, how it's expressed. And so this happened when I was given the third round of edits from my second editor that was working on the draft. And they were very nice and they were very deep. So I kind of sat back and I was like, I have to redo this. I have to rewrite this whole thing. And I was exhausted and I didn't really know what to do. So I sat back and I was like staring at my computer screen, just looking at the book cover that we had designed that had this eye on it. And I was like, what is the most boiled down version of what it is that I'm trying to say? And that's where the point came from. And I just like looked at the pupil of the eye and I was like, okay, just say it. Just make the point. Anxiety is creativity ready to be transmuted. That's a point, right? And then I started looking at that. I'm like, okay, so that's a vision. So then how would you describe it? What's like a way that I can sort of like very extravagantly, like indulgently, actually like create like a scene that helps clarify what that point means. And then I turned the eye over and I was like, oh, that's a compass. Okay, so you can now apply that to a certain direction. So in the case of entrepreneurship, that's like you have a point, which is a need, a vision, which is what you see as the business that you want to create, a compass, direction, that's product market fit. Like, what is the industry? What is the market that this idea, this point, this vision really belongs in? And then I rotated it again and I saw, oh, that looks like a star. And I was like, okay, a star. All right. So that's like a North Star. Like, what is the guiding light that is like a beautiful story or person or place or thing that embodies the highest potential of this idea, that I can basically point to and say, like, that's where we want to walk towards. And then a journey is where you make it really not about you. You make it about them. You provide an experience. In the case of the book, it's like meditations or journaling exercises. It could be an event. It could be something that you provide for somebody else to experience the idea for themselves on their own terms without you telling them. You're showing them, or they're showing themselves. And then the last piece is a lesson, which is like a point on a higher octave, basically. So it's as simple and clear as a point. In the case of my first chapter, the point is anxiety is creativity ready to be transmuted. And the lesson at the end of it is the only way out is in. And so the only way out is in doesn't make a lot of sense until you've gone through that whole journey. And now you're in. Once you understand what that means, you're initiated into the point, the vision, you've followed the compass, you've seen the star, you've taken the journey, and now you have the lesson, which becomes a seed to another point and another part of the everlasting unfolding of creation. So this is the dingbats of my book. I realized when I made these symbols, and they came from this like unconscious place because I just made them, and I looked back and I'm like, oh, that's what they mean. I rewrote the whole draft. Every chapter is now organized against these sections.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. So with that note, and everyone, just as a heads up, I'm about to open this up for questions that James is going to help me moderate. So if you want to ask questions to Will about creativity, culture, business, entrepreneurship, Reddit, his bass playing, all those things, make sure you direct message those to James Zabrowski. He's a nice guy and he will help us field the questions. But in the meantime, so Will, so we started with a point, a vision, a compass, a star, a journey, a lesson, but going from this inward to outward to this shared expression. And I mentioned earlier how one of the things I love about you is your ability to bring people into that conversation, to create the space for it, for that group participation. So for all of us on this call here, being fellow makers and shapers, we are the music makers, we are the dreamers of dreams and all that. What do you see in the future? Like how can makers and entrepreneurs and creatives best be equipping themselves to set them up for success, set themselves up for success, to set their communities up for success, as you're seeing change take place over the next 3 to 5 years?
I mean, in very literal terms, I think enabling people's resilience rather than reliance is a very powerful lane of opportunity. So products, the F-150 Lightning has a reverse current feature that you can use it as a power generator for your house if the power grid goes down. The Apple Watch, they're talking about how that enables you to hike to the top of mountains or be okay in a car crash or identify a heart condition earlier on. You've got upstart companies like, I forget if it's Noom or Loom, but that's like home composting kits, things like that. So we've been through this like 3-year sort of inner journey that COVID put us all through to really contend with like a pretty somber and sober, like look at, how we're doing health-wise, top to bottom. Mm-hmm. But humans like to adapt and have fun. And we are now entering this sort of other phase of dealing with, what the word was for, I think Oxford Dictionary's word for 2022 was permacrisis. So whether it's a wildfire or an earthquake or supply chain issues with eggs or another wave of the pandemic, people's idea of their own resilience has become more important than ever. And it's not just sober, it's fun, it's entertainment. That's why Last of Us is a popular show right now, is that people are kind of seeing a version, a dark version, but a version nonetheless of that fantasy for their entertainment. This is radically different than the way that business and markets operated for the last paradigm, because the last paradigm was all about centralized systems and your reliance on being tapped into that centralized system. People don't want that anymore. They want to be resilient. They want to be enabled. They want their go bag. They want to explore. They want to travel. They have done the inner work and they're ready to see where they can test it, right? So everybody's kind of this sort of astronaut character, this journeying character in a way that they weren't beforehand. So building products that help them do that.
Heck yeah. That's okay. I know that there's parts of that are good and parts of that are challenging, but it also just makes you really excited. And that actually goes really well. So like the first question that we got was actually, so on that note, how important is creativity for an entrepreneur, and can a business fail if it doesn't have a creative founder? Which you and I might have a certain nuance on that response, but go ahead. What do you think?
Well, can a business fail if it doesn't have a creative partner? I don't think so. No, but I think a creative partner is essential to building something that lasts. So a technical founder is somebody that can bring it to ground, right? And kind of get into the market very, very quickly. So like you look at like the last few years, and you have the AI wave right now. You had Web3 before that. You had VR before that. And it was all about technical speed to really just like get to market as quickly as you can. So that's very apparent why that's really important, because you get the early signals of success. But in those examples that I just cited, those are all waves that have crashed sort of in their own right. And the way that you persevere through that is if you have creative vision, is if you have like a very real sense of what the brand, the community, the culture really represents, so that it can move through cycles of change.
Gotcha. And that ties into our next question, which they were asking about resilience. And so like, what's an example you have of like, okay, a wave crashed and Will Cady got caught on the wrong side of it, and what did you do with that? Like any examples that we could learn from?
Yeah, well, that was what brought me to Reddit, actually. So I was working at a music magazine that had gone from print to digital, and I was on that wave of the building of online networks of audiences. They're just kind of like houses of brands that gathered blogs and music magazines and other sort of like websites. It was like, we have a network of 300 million readers, right, was the word. Then I started noticing the language shift. Users. And that's where Facebook and Snap and Twitter started to rise. And so the behaviors and the attention, which is really the resource, the most valuable resource that the economy runs on is attention. It was moving to a different place. So you could literally see the wave move. And so I left the music magazine and I went to a platform, but I did the same exact thing in a different place. And so that made all the difference. And so that's kind of how I figuratively, maybe a little bit literally here, keep my eye on the horizon to track the waves that are coming and going. It's just notice how the language changes. And we always have these sort of cycles where something rises and then it crashes. And so for me, being in the right place at Reddit was because I was keeping an eye on that next wave, because I had gotten on the magazine wave late, but I could get on the platform wave early.
And that's excellent. And that again goes back to what you mentioned earlier about this is an exchange. It's not necessarily always about your idea. It's about listening and participating and having those feedback loops. And that was helpful. Yeah.
I should also add, it's not just in language, it's also in the data in terms of like traffic was going down for publishers, traffic was going up for platforms.
Very important. Follow the money to an extent. Yes. Just follow. Okay, kids. Yeah. And here's another question we have, I think goes really well with that. So how does one reach out to that network with other individuals, to sort of ignite that spark to bring ideas to reality? We've mentioned that a few times about how you've done that really well at Reddit and, in bands and at different companies with different people, and even with this book and the exchange and the conversations you've had. So for somebody who's saying like, well, I've got these ideas, I want to be a part of those conversations. How do I find them? How do I begin them?
Well, I've having something creative that you're working on is such a powerful magnet for partnership. And, asking people what they're creating is so much more interesting than asking them what they're doing, because there's a story in there. And so if you know your story and you know what you're working on, like people want to support it. They want to be a part of it. They want to be involved. And the fact that I have this book has totally transformed the nature of this conversation, because now there's a vision, there's a thing, right? And when I was in the process of writing it, it had the same effect. I noticed that people really wanted to know what it was about and how they could support me. And then they would like bring things to me, like their ideas in a certain way, and just like wanted to riff with it, or just like they would feed me meals and just like talk with me when I traveled, because I was working on something creative. And that was so much more interesting to people than what I did, what my job was. When my friends, when I would visit them, introduced me as, like head of creative strategy at Reddit, that's cool. That's what I do. But when they introduced me as somebody that's working on writing a book, totally different kind of connection and way more human and way more fun. So where that kind of manifests is, I think a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck in the trapping of being like, I'm starting a business. A lot of writers get stuck in the trap of being like, I'm writing a book. I literally was talking with somebody yesterday, because now there's this thing where, now that I've been through one of the thresholds of actually getting the draft done, other people that are writing books want to talk with me about the experience. And somebody said, they're like, yeah, I'm writing a book. And I was like, what is it about? And they didn't have an answer. And I just was like pushing them so hard. I'm like, I want to know what you're writing about. And the more we started to pull on that thread, the more interesting the whole thing became, right? Like there's thousands of people that are starting businesses. There's thousands of people that are starting books, but only you are creating the story that you're creating. And that's where the fire is.
Yeah. And it's not about the idea necessarily. It's about the conversation and the relationship. Like the idea can change. The book changed. As you said, you got feedback from your editor, you changed the whole book, but it came out of that conversation. And I think so often we get too hung up on, oh, well, the end product will be, and we never take those first couple of steps, and we never share those, and we never get to that point. And then we're surprised when we don't have a finished book or, a unicorn company at the end of the day.
And you don't have to have the idea, because you don't have to have the answer, a question, right? So when I would say my book is about where creativity comes from, that's a question. And I started saying that before I had the answer. So that's you pointing at a star and being like, or pointing to the top of a mountain and being like, I'm going that way. And then now people are standing shoulder to shoulder with you. And they're like, okay, I see what you see. Then you have a really cool conversation.
Very much so. And so on that one, I'll give our last audience question, which is this, and this is a fun softball. Okay, with all of that, like, so what is your take then on things like, Chat GPT and AI and how everyone talks about how they're transforming the world? What do you think is going to happen there?
I think it's forcing us to contend with the difference between creativity and work. And there's a lot of work that AI can do, but there are elements of creativity that it can't. For example, it can't be anxious. And in that anxiety that we feel about what it's going to take from us, we're going to adapt and we're going to create. things that we haven't even imagined yet. And that's where I could not be more excited for what's going to fill the space that it creates.
Damn it, that was so good. If I may, that was phenomenal. If I could snap, oh, I guess I can snap. My mic's unmuted. I can snap. That was phenomenal. So wow. Dang it, Will. This is so cool. I'm glad to have cool friends. Guys, isn't the world a better place with really, really cool people? If we could give a huge round of applause for Will. And Diana and Monica, would you guys mind dropping the link to Which Way is North in the chat? There's a few claps. Thanks, everybody. So that was fantastic. And Will, huge thanks, man, for sharing your heart, your mind, your journey, for riffing with us today and hanging out on that. So really, really appreciate you in that same spirit. So of course, the call, everybody here is a part of Collegiate Entrepreneur Organization. And if you're a part of that, you're very, very much interested in the ecosystem of ideas and how do you create them? How do other people create them? How do you create that little spark and be able to share it with everybody? So this is a fun fact. So I'm head of entrepreneurship at the Singleton Foundation. We're about creating a world where everyone can play the game and create ideas, share them, build them, etc. So to that end, we made a new company called Slyngshot, which you might have heard a little bit about, but essentially it's a platform that makes it possible for anyone, regardless of their background or education, to be able to get on and do exactly that, create, build, and share ideas in a matter of minutes with just your thumb. So you can go from, I'm not an entrepreneur, I don't have an idea, to I have an idea and holy smokes, I have a company and I can share it with my friends and get that feedback, that early stage feedback that Will was talking about. I'm not trying to hard sell you. If you're a part of CEO, here, I'm dropping a link in the chat right now. Congratulations, you all get it for free. So we're giving it away to all of you guys for free. It's a custom CEO version of Slyngshot. Super stoked to share it with you. If you haven't been on there yet, it's pretty easy. It's like I said, you can hop on, it'll help you create, build, and share a business idea in a matter of minutes with your thumbs. In about 20 or 30 minutes, it'll kick out a custom website for each idea that'll have your idea, your strategy, your product, your value. And again, not just in a way where you can understand it, but in a way where everyone else can understand it too, which is so critical for that conversation to happen. And then, as we talked about, it's not about your idea being right. So this whole thing, you can edit, you can change at any moment as you get feedback, as you grow. It's really great. It's free. We're stoked. So check out that link. We'll email it out too. And then also we'll send a link to Which Way is North, so everybody can pre-order the book and give some love to Will and support that, and also learn a whole heck of a lot. So James, is that it?
I think that's all. I think it's time to say good night.
That's it. Everyone, thank you so much for being on the call. Really appreciate it. Let's do cool things. Let's be in touch. And I don't know, keep being awesome.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Cool.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Ryan.
Cheers. Goodbye. I'm going to stay on the call just until everybody leaves, like a news anchor, just talking. But like normally I'm muted by this point, and so no one can hear me. Will, that was awesome, man. That was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much. That last section, we just needed to take that last response as just like a social cut down. And
yeah, well, I mean, it was really something special. At one point, you said we tend to measure technology and the power for distribution versus disruption. And you would give Mark Zuckerberg a run for his money with that response.
Yeah, man. Its ability to disrupt and destroy versus create. Gosh, dang it. That was a good one. Will, thank you. Awesome. James, anything else we need to do on here? Who else on the call?
I think we're good.
Some of us.
We've got some stragglers, but I think they're hanging out.
All right. Okay, cool. I'll let you guys go.
All right.
Enjoy